David, Slayton, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you, Mark.
It's great to have you back on. I could have checked to see how long it's been since you were on the first time, but just been a blast following you online and watching all the good news come in for your first book, White Trash Warlock, which seemed to do very, very well from what I could tell. And now we're on the cusp, or maybe right near the publication date of trailer Park Trickster.
Yeah, October 12th. Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right. He's got a copy.
Right here.
That's great. That's great. So we are coming right up on that. And I want to hear about how everything is going in the writing world, but just in general, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I think like a lot of people, the pandemic in the last year or so have been tumultuous, more than I wanted for sure. In some ways, it has been personally challenging, losing people, the difficulties of being quarantined, and of course, releasing a book into all of that, as well as a very contentious presidential election, which definitely affects book sales and people's responses to media. And on top of that, of course, being isolated from my writing community, like the Rocky Mountain fiction writers, has been very challenging. At the same time, stay home, eat snacks, sit in this chair and write books. I can do that. So I wrote 3 books last year.
Wow.
It's very productive.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, first I just want to ask you, I mean, White Trash Warlock, before we get into the second book, that seemed to do, would you say it did better than your expectations?
I think I had really high hopes.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit of self-illusion there about it, but really well. The main thing is finding the readers who it's meant to find. I get emails from people areas who grew up like Adam, the main character, like myself. I grew up in Guthrie, Oklahoma, as we've talked about before. And having somebody in an environment like that or a location like that reach out in this book and connect with it has meant just I can live off one of those emails for about 2 months, just that email. So
that's great. And the reviews,
I'm very happy.
Reviews were great. The reviews were awesome.
Yeah, we got a Publishers Weekly starred review, which was very kind. They were also very kind to Trickster about a month or so back. My publisher Blackstone's an amazing partner. They released an incredible book that did very well. People really liked it. In addition to that, we didn't win any awards, but White Trash Warlock was a finalist for the Colorado Book Award this year and was nominated for a couple of other awards. So I'm just very grateful to everybody who's found it and everybody who's read it. And it's a lifetime dream come true. There's no other way to say it. It makes me so incredibly grateful. It's really just the only word.
Yeah. And when did that come out?
So Warlock was October 13th, perfect date, right? For a book with that title and a book with its theme. And Trickster is October 12th this year because dates rotate. It's got to be a Tuesday. Having a release date of October 13th. I mean, what's more perfect than that?
That's great. All right. Now set this whole world up for listeners who may not know about it, and give us a sketch of the first Warlock and take us into the second Trickster and tell us what's evolving here in your world.
So White Trash Warlock is the story of Adam Binder. He's a broke gay witch who lives in a trailer park in Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I come from. He has my rural background, my food insecurity and poverty that I grew up with. And he has been isolated from his family, his brother and his mother, for many years, because they thought when his magic first started to emerge, which was the sight and him seeing into other worlds and hearing voices and seeing things, that was mistaken for mental illness. They had him put into an institution. And that, of course, caused a major break between them all, as I think so for Adam. But when his sister-in-law here in Denver, Colorado, where I now live, so I got to use a lot of our local history and landmarks, becomes possessed by a spirit, Adam's brother realizes, okay, maybe Adam's not wrong about all this stuff, and I need his help. So it causes the brothers to have to confront each other. Reconciliation might be a little bit of too kind, but it causes them to face the conflicts in their past and makes Adam come to Denver to help out because he's a good person and he's going to help out his sister-in-law, Annie, regardless. Unfortunately, the situation in Denver is so much larger and worse than he understands, and that causes him to have to interface with beings from the other side or the spirit realm, which in my universe, you got to think of it like a sandwich with our plane of existence being in the middle, the meat, as it were. And then there's higher planes where like the elves reside and they sometimes deign to come down to us. And then there are lower planes, which are more dangerous, which we'll be touching on in book 3, by the way, Deadbeat Druid. In case you're wondering what's below, you will find out. So that's the main impetus of White Trash Warlock. And then it's not quite a cliffhanger, but Warlock ends on a hook that causes Adam to have to return to Guthrie, Oklahoma in a hurry. Now, this causes a lot of drama because what he confronts in Oklahoma is family history. And there are many mysteries that were introduced in Warlock that I will be solving in book 2. I don't like to drag stuff out too long for readers. You need to know who some people are and drop some masks and reveal some big bads. Book 2 will definitely do that. Gets that out in the open. But Adam in book 1 had just entered into a new relationship. And I'm going to spoil a little bit because it's all on the cover copy. By the end of book 1, Adam and Vic have entered into a relationship. Adam has to rush back to Oklahoma and he's in such a panic. He doesn't even tell anyone. He doesn't tell Vic, which, is a jerk thing to do, frankly. Vic is trying to be patient, but he pursues Adam across the states to help Adam deal with the crisis. And unfortunately, his road trip is co-opted by Argent, the Queen of Swords, an elven trickster she's just fantastic. And any road trip with Argent is going to mean you're going to be taking shortcuts through the spirit realm. So if you're doing your geography, you probably have figured out that there is not a lighthouse or shipwrecks anywhere between Denver and Oklahoma. We're kind of landlocked. There are a lot of rattlesnakes.
The Arkansas River doesn't have any lighthouses. Is that what you're saying?
Not at least that I've driven by. And that Argent basically hijacking this road trip is going to take Vic places he never would have imagined. It's going to result in some much larger scale politics and things that it's a really fun book. I enjoyed writing it.
Very cool. Wow. So most of the second book takes place in Oklahoma?
Yeah, I really wanted to go back to Guthrie, which due to some family illnesses and things recently, I've actually had a chance to do. So, which was nice. I got to make sure that my research was right. And it happily coincided with my final edits on the book. So I could confirm, like the Beacon, our old drive-in movie theater, is still there and operable. Things I grew up with. I grew up in rural poverty. And this gave me the chance to go back to the trailer in the woods, to drive around the old family homestead where we have to burn trash and, there because there's no trash service, etc. And the scrub oak and the rain and all of that. So, yep. Okay. I definitely got these details right. And nothing's changed in that, setting. So
David, how do you go about mixing and setting the right proportion between what you just mentioned, which is lots of actual real life, real world details from your locations with these other realms? How do you balance the fantasy and the reality?
Well, I love fantasy. I've written several epic fantasy books that are on submission that we're working on selling. But epic fantasy, by the way, is a really tough market to sell into. That said, I also find that you need to be grounded. The fantasies that I enjoy the most, I really like urban fantasy, where Warlock is set in that genre, because it does have a grounding element. It does bring us back to the human. I feel like having enough mundane makes the magical interesting. You don't want too much of one world. You want both. At the same time, while I love urban fantasy and fantasy, it often fell emotionally flat for me. A lot of what I read doesn't have the full range of human emotion. It's either high tragedy, grimdark, serious, or too light. Terry Pratchett, who I love, like everything he's ever written is on a shelf over there. This is not a disparagement. I wanted something that kind of have found a way in the middle. Again, think of that sandwich metaphor. I guess that's the one we'll be using today. So,
You must
so
be hungry.
well, and I just wanted to make sure that I got to tell the side of a character who's different. When you read urban fantasy, so many of the characters are these badass heroes who can throw fireballs and deal with powers on equal footing. Adam's not a wimp, and he's certainly not a coward. He's actually, his cockiness gets him into trouble a little bit, but he isn't magically powerful. And I wanted to write an underdog story. Again, poverty, where I grew up with, in a gay and bookwormy in a rural setting. And I wanted to write a character like me, because that's what I'm always looking for, is to read characters who are more like me in my reading.
So when your character encounters things that are going to take him out of this world, how long is he gone? I guess is he gone for into this other world, and then he comes back and then back and forth all the time, or is it just always kind of right there and it's kind of like a thin membrane where he can just kind of bounce back and forth?
So physically speaking, Adam's not powerful enough to cross over on his own. He can't walk from our world to the spirit realm. He doesn't have the magic for that. He can spirit walk, though, which he can basically meditate in a dreamlike state, send his spirit into that realm and interact with beings there. And that's largely how he learned to control his power. When he was in the institution, needing to escape, he would sleep a lot. And sleeping, he would spirit walk, and that's where he met his first love, an elf named Parak, which that plot line gets dealt with in book 1 and has some other repercussions in the series. But additionally to that, that gave him the ability to learn to shield himself, as well as to be able to come back and forth from that realm. Now, there are definite times, like Vic's road trip with Argent, where a more powerful being might pluck his body along, and so he is physically there as well. There's a nice moment in book 1 where Adam is spirit walking and his spirit is taken too far. There's an emergency happens, and he has to be dragged further along. And there's a real concern of, if he goes too far from his body, will he die? If he's planes away from it, what will happen to him? Also, I deal with the topic of, if a mortal enters the fairy realms, how much time passes? So if he stays in the fairy realm for a week, is it a year back home? If he goes too far. So Adam's power set is very limited. He touches that realm and he can see into it, but he can't walk in and out of it at will.
Gotcha. Interesting. So I'm wondering what changed in your writing between book 1 and book 2. Did your approach change? Did you learn anything? Did you know, now that you're under contract or have a publisher, that you needed to get a little more efficient about any particular part of your process?
Absolutely. I think we all have to become plotters in the end. I used to be a complete pantser. I would just sit down, throw scenes onto the computer, remix them. I might even summarize them on a Post-it, play around with structure, do a lot of that after the scenes were written. And then I had deadlines. And a deadline with a publisher meant, we need both of these books in the next, I basically had 6 months. And I didn't want to write the whole series before I sold, because I had a friend whose experience was, she wrote the first book, she had written the whole series, and then when they bought the series, I can't remember who her publisher was, I think it was HarperCollins, they said, this is great, but book 1 is 3 books, so we need you to break this up, rewrite it into 3 books. Wow. That meant books 2 had already written had to be scrapped, so she'd wasted a lot of time on those. So I didn't put my situation, but I put myself into the other situation of, the day I signed Warlock contract and handed over Warlock, out 6 months to deliver Trickster, and I didn't have a word of it written. So to make that go faster was to borrow from my friend Katie Edwards, who is a master plotter, and I'm getting much better at plotting now. Because if you pants, you often you find yourself, you've gone down 10, 20,000 words, and you've gone in the wrong direction. You have to discard it and go back. So I'm becoming much more of a plotter, which is paying off. Again, I wrote 3 books last year, so I'm learning to write faster.
You literally wrote 3 books in the last 12 months. He's nodding. For those who are listening on the podcast, he is now nodding.
And I should say too, I've made a lot of sacrifices. I get asked a lot about how I balance, because I have a pretty high demanding day job. I'm in software, which I enjoy that, and it pays the bills because at this point writing doesn't. And I gave up TV. I gave up the gym, which I greatly missed because, well, I'm experiencing some of the urban sprawl of Bitcoin. But I've given up video games, which I love. I've given up a lot of hobbies and things that I'm interested in order to make time to write, because I do have deadlines, and I don't just want to be an urban. I have other projects, other genres I work in. So those projects were also. I'll finish an urban fantasy and then I'll go write an epic fantasy or a mystery. So yeah, I should also point out too that my books are about 80,000 words long. So when I say I wrote 80,000 words last year, that's about 20,000 shippable or good quality words that I would show my agent a month. So when you break it down that far, that's not too scary.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, if you're committing the time to it, 1,000, so maybe your goal is what, 1,500 words a day or?
Roughly. I believe strongly that you can't stick to a daily word count because you'll crush yourself.
I agree.
Again, I have a day job that just sometimes it's going to be a 10-hour day and I'm not going to have the brain points. I try to run a daily practice of 5 a.m., write for 2 to 3 hours, the day job, and then edit and we'll write on the week. I don't stick to a daily word count goal. I have a weekly word count goal of 10. And that serves me well. That way I have flex in my schedule. And I'm not, because what I found was if I was missing my daily goal, I'd beat myself up.
Right.
And then I'd feel guilty. And then I wouldn't write for weeks. So I gave myself permission to say, you know what? I'm just not going to be able to write today. It's going to make it up on Saturday.
Right. Right. So the 3 books you finished in the last 12 months, the one is the 3rd book in the series.
Mm-hmm. Deadbeat Druid.
Deadbeat Druid. Well, like those are great titles. Let's just stop for a moment and acknowledge these are great titles. White Trash Warlock, Trailer Park Trickster, and Deadbeat Druid. Those are great. And then what are the other 2?
I finished a mystery that we have on submission now that will probably go out on a pen name. For those of you who don't know this about writing and publishing, if you have very wildly different genres, you often need different pen names in order to. There's a weird brand crossover that people may not follow. So that is I like its title, but it's kind of a working title. So we'll see what happens with that.
Care to share?
It's currently To Catch a Greek.
Okay.
It's about archaeology and archaeology thieves set in Greece using my history background. So that's a lot of fun.
Wow. And a main protagonist of...
is a disgraced archaeologist who, on the night before his big find, his fiance stole his work. And when his mentor is killed, his former fiance is implicated. And he gets a chance to maybe get back his life back, as well as get a little bit of revenge on the guy. So it's a fun kind of whodunit. And I got to use all my favorite sites in Greece that I've been to, and I could geek out with you about that for hours.
Well, let's just quickly, no, I can't do hours, but are we set on an island or on the mainland?
On the mainland mostly. So it's mostly set in the Peloponnese, but I did work in Delphi because Delphi is my favorite place in the world. So I had to spend a little time in Delphi no matter what.
That's great. And of course, you might have to go research that when the book sells, and then you can spend a month over there making sure the details are right.
Well, and I have. I spent a month in Greece some years ago, and that really was the impetus for all of this, all the research from that trip. And again, being this history archaeology nerd, grew up very poor, and so I'm always trying to make up for my education because I'm a high school dropout who has 3 college degrees now, so I'm constantly learning. But I will, if you ever go to Greece with me, I will drag you through fields to find ruined temples and piles of rocks and explain to you what it was 2,000 years ago. You'll either be really into it or bored to death.
Oh, I'll be into it. Believe me, I will totally be into it. That's terrific. Wow. Well, I also might suggest a tax write-off trip after the book sells to go check your facts. Just, as a possibility.
Oh, yeah. If I can get away with it. Totally.
Okay. All right. So we got 2 books. One sounds like a traditional mystery. And we have the third book in your series. And then what was the third book you wrote last year?
The third book is called Last Son of the Night, and it's a rewrite of a trunked book. It's one of my epic fantasies. It's kind of Romeo meets Julian with a heavy dose of darkness in Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn. So it's about the last worshiper of the Boon Goddess who was murdered, and her death stopped the tides, caused the cycle of life to slow, so fewer babies are being born. But worse than any of that, the ghosts of the dead don't have a path to the underworld. And what's happening is they're starting to overwhelm the living. And they come out at night in the form of a mist that is hungry for blood if you follow old Greek myths and ghosts. So if you're walking through the alleys at night, if there's any mist and you should trip and cut yourself or nick yourself on a sharp rock, you're probably going to die. So the world's it's a very dangerous place. And essentially he's trying to find a way to see if he can save the world.
Wow. Now, are you working on all these simultaneously, or a little bit here, a little bit there? Do you kind of work for a few months on one, pick up another?
I can only work on one book at a time. I found that it's kind of like an operating system. I really only have space in my brain for one. So what happens is I load up a project, work through it, finish it completely. Once I type the end, put it away, take a couple of days to let my brain reset, start the next project, and then wash, repeat, and then I'll go back and edit after I've had a few months, using Stephen King's recommendation of try to give yourself time between editing and writing, because then you can see so many problems. And then I'll take, like, in between projects, I'll take a week or two to edit or polish and maybe a short story or two, and then come back and start the next novel.
Excellent. I saw just today, I believe, on social media that you had a chance to go talk to some students at a community college, was it?
Yeah, I got to go talk to the Community College of Aurora yesterday to a creative writing class. And here's a secret if you don't know this already. The next generation that's coming up behind us is amazing. They are phenomenal. If you are feeling like the world is lost and hopeless, go talk to teenagers. Go to a class or sit in, or they're just fantastic people. They're fantastic young adults and new adults. And I honestly, every time I start to get to despair about the state of the world, I get the chance to do something like this, and it just lifts my spirit so much. They asked the best questions. They were just very cool and attentive. The only thing that was really freaky is they don't have textbooks anymore. There was not a textbook in sight. They all have tablets and the notebooks to write in. That's a change. But other than that, it was a really amazing experience.
How has it felt for you over the last year since your debut, just getting out there as an author and sharing what you've learned?
I hope that I'm paying it forward, and I hope that I'm paying it backwards too. Communities like Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers or Pikes Peak Writers those are the environments that when I walked into them for the first time, I was like, oh, these are my people. I thought I was going to fit in really well with this group of people or that group of people. I never had that experience until I found those writing communities. That's where I found my home and my tribe, as it were. So being able to teach workshops to libraries and schools, to be able to do things on Zoom as an author, and I've been teaching quite a few workshops on Zoom over the last year. I didn't get to do any in-person events. The college event yesterday was the first time I've appeared in person as a published author.
Wow.
In my career, because everything that's happened in the pandemic has stopped that.
Makes sense. Yeah. That
must have
been pretty cool.
It was. And but at the same time, it's like, I did. So when you asked about success, I'm so proud of Warlock's success. At the same time, there's this bittersweetness because all I've ever wanted is to have a live book event, and I've never gotten to have one.
Well, that's got to change. That will change.
It will. I have hope. Again, he'd asked me this question yesterday morning. I might have been a little down about it, but after talking to those students yesterday, there are good days ahead. This generation is going to be amazing.
Yeah. Are you teaching, or, well, I should ask you first if you're coming to Colorado Gold, and if so, are you teaching any workshops?
It's release week, unfortunately, so I won't be at Colorado Gold this year. I'm still kind of hedging. I may come as an attendee just to see all of you, but I didn't put in for any workshops because Trickster comes out on the 12th, and it is that week. And I do have a few virtual events already. I will be at Mile High Con as a guest and a panelist early in October, and I will be at Denver Fan Expo, formerly Denver Comic Con, and I'll be there as an author doing some events and panels as well around Halloween. But Colorado Gold, unfortunately, is like when they sent out the announcement, like, that's release week.
Yeah. Wow. And your publisher obviously has set these publication dates. These are not things that are under your control.
Well, and I wouldn't want them to shift it. Right. 2 weeks before Halloween is perfect for my brand.
Yeah. Right.
Just couldn't be better.
Right. Talk a little bit about Blackstone. How does that work? Everybody sort of thinks of them as Blackstone Audio, but they've obviously changed their model a little bit, and it's doing quite well.
They've been called a disruptor in the industry, and especially where I work in my day world of tech, that is a good term to be labeled with.
Yeah.
So Blackstone began as an audio publisher, I think about 20 some odd years ago in Ashland, Oregon. They purposefully set up shop there because the Shakespeare Festival, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, is there. It's a successful, amazing place.
Yeah.
It gave them access to all these actors who have a lot of time on their hands, gave them access to voices. So I got to go there when I signed Warlock's contract. I just happened to be going for Shakespeare, and so it was coincidental that I could be there the day I signed my contract, and it worked out perfectly. It was very funny when my acquiring editor and I first started talking, and I pitched him. I said, oh, he's like, we're in Ashland. I said, oh my gosh, Ashland's one of my favorite places. And I think he might have been thinking I might be snowballing him a little bit, And he's like, where's your favorite place to eat? And I listed like 3 restaurants. And I listed the bed and breakfast we stay at. He's like, okay, you're legit. But that was kind of cute. But one of the coolest things, I'll tell you one thing about The Office that answers the real question. The Blackstone converts, of course, all their own books now into audio, but they're, as Mark said, they're probably one of the world's most prestigious audiobook publishers. So they have a whole room of books that were classic books, for example, that were sent to them to convert. So they've cut off the spine, and the spine is hanging on a wire, and then the stapled or binder clipped pages that were put out for the narrator to be able to go through, because they had to slice the book up, because these books have been published so far back, there's not like an ebook version of it.
Wow.
And so they were using an old paper copy, and so you see this cool graveyard room of the books they recorded.
That would be pay money to see that. Yeah.
They're also just this amazing place. So they try to source everything locally and do everything in Ashland to put back into the community. So everything that you see with the Blackstone book, the audio CDs are printed there. The labels, all of that is done in-house. They do a lot of the narration in-house, though of course now they've distributed. So my narrator actually lives in Maryland, and his wife is the producer. So I have this amazing husband-wife team doing my audiobooks for Blackstone.
That's great.
But Blackstone essentially, I think, has been about 5 years now, decided that they wanted to get into print, and they began moving not just from audio, but doing their own properties, their own book productions. And I just love working with them. They're the coolest house. I love their philosophy. They just put up a video on social media of their New York office. It's very slick, very neat. But they do the cover art in-house. And it gives me the ability to know my whole team. So I know my marketing team well. I know my cover artists and I exchanged emails about ideas and stuff for promotion. I really love working with them as a mid-sized publisher. They are, I get a level of input and contact I wouldn't necessarily get with a much larger house.
That is fantastic. Well, it sounds like things are going really well, and my personal congratulations to you. So this is just always great to catch up and dip into your world for a little while and hear your perspective on things, David. Really great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, talking about paying it forward, And of course, we could go all day talking about archaeology or books or writing, but again, this has been a great half hour. So we like to always give our guests a chance to mention a book or one particular author that you think the rest of us need to know more about.
I'm going to cheat a little bit, but it's not too much because they do collaborate. So, two authors who I really have fallen in love with lately who are indie are Gregory Ash and C.S. Poe. Now, C.S. Poe, she writes very character-driven mysteries with she's got this magical steampunk series that called Steam and Magic that I'm just in love with, and I'm like, please get the next book out. Like, I literally have it like, come on, I'm watching for pre-order. So her stuff's phenomenal. And then Gregory writes across multiple genres, but he's mostly known for these very gritty mysteries. They both have everything in audio, and they both have everything in ebook, of course. And they recently have collaborated on a series. The first one is A Friend in the Dark, and it's set in New York. It's a really intriguing murder mystery plot. It has, the second book is out, and I loved it too. But what they did, so Gregory writes characters that are really gritty and distinct. I don't always like them, but I can appreciate his craft in these characters. So this isn't somebody I really want to be friends with most of the time, but they're somebody I enjoy reading about because I can see how real this person is, even if my dislike is slightly real. And then C.S. Poe, her characters are quirky and more colorful and fun. And when you put those two things together, it is, because they do the dueling point of view, it's just two great tastes that taste great together. They just do such a phenomenal combo on. And that book, C.S. Poe recently moved to New York, and the book is set in New York, and it does a phenomenal job of city as character. New York feels like the third person in the team. You get a really powerful sense of the city. I haven't spent a lot of time in New York, but my limited knowledge of it and exposure to it, I feel that she's really brought that home.
That's great. Fantastic. David, as always, what a pleasure. Best of luck to you, and we will catch up with you down the road.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Always happy to be here.